This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real events. Names, dates, locations, and identifying details have been changed or dramatized to protect privacy and enhance the narrative. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental or used fictitiously. This content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not aim to glorify crime, promote violence, or pass judgment on real individuals. Viewer discretion is advised. Some scenes may contain mature, disturbing, or triggering content. What you are about to watch could have happened anywhere, to anyone. It's inspired by real events. Whispers of truth buried beneath layers of fiction. We've changed the names, the dates, the locations, but the emotions, the betrayal, the fear, those are real. This story is not meant to accuse, only to reveal, to make you question, who do you really trust? If stories like this keep you thinking, long after they end, hit subscribe, smash like, and drop your theory in the comments. Now watch closely, before the truth disappears again.
The house was quiet, but nothing felt still. Dinner was still warm. Chicken breast cut into small bites. A bottle of medication untouched on the counter. A syringe capped, the kind used for seizures. At 9:48 p.m., dispatch received a call. The voice was calm. No panic, no begging. I did what I had to, for her. Then silence. Police arrived 6 minutes later. They didn't expect what they saw. A veteran officer, shot once in the chest, lay in the hallway. His badge still clipped to his belt. His gun holstered, not drawn. In the living room, on a child-sized recliner, was an 11-year-old girl, eyes closed, wrapped in a weighted blanket, her favorite, her stuffed animal tucked beneath her chin. Out back, under a humming floodlight, stood a woman. She wore blue scrubs, the same kind she wore in the emergency room. Only now they were covered in blood. Not from a stranger, but from her husband. I gave them every chance, she said, hands raised. I begged him. You have no idea. And maybe no one did, because inside that house was a woman who had spent her life treating gunshot wounds, wrapping burns, stopping seizures in midnight ERs. She'd calmed mothers screaming for their babies. She'd whispered to children who couldn't speak. She knew what trauma looked like. And when it started showing up on her daughter's body, she noticed the flicker in the eyes, the way she tensed during baths, the bruises, the fear. Charnay couldn't say the words, but Kenyatta knew. She knew because she'd seen that same fear on too many children. But this time, it wasn't some anonymous monster. It was her husband, Officer Deshaun Fields, a man trusted by the city, respected by his precinct, a cop with commendations and clean reviews. And she had tried, reported it once, got silence, spoke to his supervisor, got warned. No one believed her. So she did what the badge never would. And now the sirens weren't rushing to save. They were coming to clean up what the system ignored. This wasn't a case of a woman gone mad. This was a woman trained to recognize damage, who realized her daughter wouldn't survive another week of it. This isn't the story of a crime. It's the autopsy of a decision. And the real question isn't why she pulled the trigger. It's why nobody else ever tried to stop her from having to. Let's go back, before the sirens, before the blood, before the scream that changed everything. Let's uncover what happened inside that house. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand who they were during the day. Not the headlines, not the mugshots or the crime scene photos, but the real people. The ones who smiled in church pews, picked up drive-through dinners, waved to neighbors from the mailbox. They lived in a quiet pocket of southeast Houston, rows of modest two-story homes, driveways with tricycles and basketball hoops. The kind of neighborhood where everybody nods, but no one really talks. Kenyatta Fields was 36, nurse, mother, church choir alto, a woman who could recite Psalm 23 from memory and make you believe every word. She wasn't loud. She wasn't showy. She was the kind of woman who brought extra Band-Aids to the park, who wiped strangers' kids' noses without hesitation, who kept a drawer full of sticky notes with scriptures she'd hand to coworkers on bad days. Her life revolved around two things: caregiving and Charnay. Charnay was her miracle. 11 years old, nonverbal, diagnosed on the spectrum at age 2, light brown eyes that never held still, a smile that flickered like a candle, shy but brilliant when it showed. She didn't speak, but she sang, low humming sounds when she felt safe, especially when Kenyatta brushed her hair or read her favorite book about the sun and the moon. Kenyatta didn't just mother Charnay. She studied her, knew her routines down to the minute. The pink plate with the dolphins on it, the blue blanket at bedtime. No tags on her shirts, no loud noises. Every moment was a strategy, a dance, a prayer. Then there was Deshawn, her husband, Charnay's father. Sergeant Deshawn Fields, 41 years old, 12 years with the Houston Police Department, 4 commendations, no complaints on file. He was a cop's cop, tactical, precise, respected. Always the first to volunteer for holiday shifts, always the last one out of the precinct. He met Kenyatta when they were both teenagers. She was handing out juice boxes at her aunt's revival. He asked her out before the sermon even ended. They got married young, built everything they had from scratch. No inheritance, no safety net, just overtime shifts and borrowed faith. For years, they were a team. He protected the streets. She healed the sick. But as time passed, something shifted. Deshawn worked more nights. Kenyatta spent more hours at home. Charney grew older. Her needs changed. Her meltdowns got louder. The autism got harder to manage. The silence between the parents stretched. And behind closed doors, things began to decay. He was always tired, always somewhere else. She was always alert, always afraid of what she couldn't name. To their neighbors, they were the picture of grace, matching church outfits, cookouts on Memorial Day, Deshawn mowing the lawn in uniform. But no one saw the tension over dinner, the way Kenyatta flinched when his keys hit the counter, the way Charnay began hiding in closets. This wasn't a broken family. It was a family in slow-motion collapse. And the ones who noticed said nothing. Because he was a cop. Because she never complained. Because silence is easier to swallow than suspicion. But one person was watching it all. Closely, quietly, without a voice. Charnay. And the truth is, she had been trying to speak all along. Just not in words. Let's go deeper. Into the rooms no one asked about, into the moments no one dared to see. Because what happened that night didn't start with a gun. It started years before, and the cracks were already there. They just finally broke. Before the blood in the headlines, there was love. Not the fleeting kind, not the kind built on shiny cars or weekend getaways. This was the kind that came from borrowed jeans and late-night bus rides, from sitting on cracked porches, dreaming about a life bigger than their zip code. Kenyatta met Deshawn when she was just 16. She was handing out flyers for her church's summer revival. He was standing across the street, leaning on a bicycle with scuffed handlebars, watching her like she was the only thing moving in the world. He asked her name. She laughed, soft and shy, but gave it anyway. By the end of that week, he was walking her home. By the end of that summer, they were inseparable. Deshawn wasn't like the other boys. He was serious. He talked about plans, about college, about wanting to make something of himself. He said he'd wear a badge one day, not because he loved power, but because someone had to protect their streets. She believed him. They married young. Too young, some people whispered. She was 19, still in nursing school. He was 23, fresh out of the academy. Their first apartment barely had furniture, just a mattress on the floor and a borrowed table from Kenyatta's aunt. But they were happy, really happy. There were love notes on the fridge, kisses in the hallway, long drives with the windows down. When Charnay was born, that happiness felt untouchable. Deshawn cried in the delivery room. Kenyatta swore she'd never seen a man look so proud. But life doesn't stay soft for long. The badge took Deshawn away from home. Long nights on patrol, late calls, overtime shifts. The job changed him. He saw too much. Violence, lies, things he never talked about. Kenyatta worked nights at the hospital. They'd pass each other like strangers in the doorway. One coming home, one going out. The love was still there, but it was quieter now, buried under exhaustion, bills, and 1,000 small misunderstandings. And then came the diagnosis. When Charnay was 2, she stopped making eye contact. She didn't speak. She rocked herself to sleep. Kenyatta knew something was wrong long before doctors confirmed it. Autism, nonverbal, a world where sounds and lights felt like attacks, and every day was a war for comfort. Kenyatta became more than a mother. She became Charnay's voice, therapist, advocate, protector. Deshaun, on the other hand, didn't know how to handle it. He loved his daughter, but her silence scared him. Her meltdowns left him frustrated, helpless, angry at a world he couldn't control. Sometimes, when Charnay screamed for hours, Deshaun would just leave. No words, no explanation. He'd sit in his car for hours, engine running, listening to the police radio instead of going inside. Kenyatta started to feel alone, not just in parenting, but in everything. She was carrying all of it, the bills, the hospital visits, the sleepless nights, and when she turned to him, he was either gone or locked behind a wall she couldn't climb anymore. They still looked perfect from the outside, matching outfits at church, family photos at Christmas, but the love that once filled their little apartment now felt like a room with no air. Kenyatta wanted to believe it could go back to the way it was, that somewhere beneath the uniform, the weariness, the anger, was the boy with the bicycle and the shy smile. But every day, it felt like that boy was further away. And with distance comes danger. Because when silence grows between two people, something always grows inside it. It started small. Charnay began avoiding certain rooms, rooms where Deshaun had been, rooms he still lingered in, even when he wasn't physically there. She stopped humming at night. That was the first thing Kenyatta noticed. The low rhythmic hum she used to make while brushing her hair. Gone. Silence took its place. Heavy, tight silence. Then came the flinches. Not wild, dramatic ones, just subtle jerks. When Deshaun entered the room, when he reached for her backpack, when his voice raised even slightly. Kenyatta watched it all. The changes, the shrinking, the shadow creeping over her daughter's body like smoke. She asked, gently, repeatedly, but Charnay didn't have the words. And even if she did, some truths live deeper than language. One night during bath time, Kenyatta noticed a bruise, upper thigh, purple, deep, the kind that didn't look accidental. She asked again. This time, Charnay covered her face and rocked. Kenyatta's heart cracked, not all at once, but like ice under pressure. The next morning, she brought it up to Deshaun. He didn't get angry, not right away. He just stared at her, cold, unblinking. "You know how she is," he said, "always bumping into something." Then he kissed her forehead and left for work. That night, Kenyatta didn't sleep. She stayed up watching the baby monitor, not for seizures, but for shadows. In the days that followed, she noticed more. Charnay would shrink away during diaper changes, hide her drawings, cling tighter during goodbyes. During one therapy session, her daughter scribbled a picture. It looked like 3 stick figures, one on the floor, one standing, one with tears so big they soaked the page. The therapist said it was normal, that children with autism often expressed confusion through art. But Kenyatta knew her child, and she knew what fear looked like when it had nowhere else to go. Still, she wasn't ready to believe. Not fully, not until she found the towel. Crumpled, hidden, faint traces of blood. A smell she couldn't place. Her knees buckled when she held it. She didn't confront him. Not yet. She needed proof. Something that couldn't be explained away. Something no one could deny. So she bought a camera, a small one, hidden inside a smoke detector in Charnay's room. And she waited. Each day that passed, she pretended, made dinner, laughed at his jokes, kissed his cheek, told herself she was imagining it. But deep down, she was preparing for the moment her heart would break beyond repair. Because when you suspect the man you sleep beside is hurting the child you carried, you don't want to be right, but you're terrified to be wrong. And somewhere, behind all the silence and softness, something was beginning to rot. The day started like any other. Cereal in a pink bowl, medication at 7:15, a ride to the special education center. Deshaun had the morning off, said he'd drive. Kenyatta watched her daughter climb into the back seat. Charnay didn't look up, didn't wave, Just before they turned the corner, Sharnay glanced back. Her eyes weren't scared. They were empty. That's when Kenyatta knew. It wasn't a guess anymore. It wasn't a whisper in her chest. It was a scream. Loud, clear, undeniable. That same day she left work early, sat in the parking lot of a Walgreens and cried into her steering wheel. Then she called her sister. She don't even flinch no more, she said. She just disappears. She didn't go home. Not right away. She drove to a law office. They told her what she already feared. Unless she had evidence, hard evidence, the badge on her husband's chest would buy him protection. So she waited 2 more days. 2 long, unbearable days. On the 3rd night, she removed the memory card from the smoke detector, locked herself in the bathroom, turned off the lights. What she saw, no one should ever see. The way he touched her, the way he whispered things, the way Sharnay froze like a statue. No screams, no fight, just surrender. Because that's what abuse looks like when it's been happening too long. It becomes quiet, obedient. Kenyatta vomited into the sink. She didn't call the police. She didn't run. She didn't even cry anymore. She became still, frozen in a kind of fury that didn't boil. It just waited. The next day, she filed paperwork for emergency guardianship. Then she deleted the footage, not to destroy it, but to keep it from being passed around like gossip. Her daughter didn't deserve that. She scheduled a meeting with a counselor, told her she suspected abuse. The counselor said she'd report it up, but nothing happened. No call, no visit. Just more silence. That Friday, Deshawn came home early, kissed her neck in the kitchen, told her he was off all weekend, said he wanted to spend family time. Kenyatta said nothing, but inside something moved. Something ancient. Not rage, not revenge. Just the final form of motherhood. The part that says, I will die for mine. That night she watched Sharnay sleep. She wrapped her in the blue blanket, kissed her forehead, sat beside her until dawn. She didn't plan to kill him. She planned to confront him. Tell him she knew. That it was over. That the law would come. But things don't always go the way we practice them in our heads because monsters don't like being named. And when morning came, something happened in that house that none of them would survive. Not fully. It was a Saturday. No holidays, no birthdays. Just a regular day with a sky so clear it felt dishonest. Breakfast was quiet. Sharnay sat at the table with her usual bowl of oatmeal, her head tilted to one side, rocking gently. Deshawn scrolled through his phone. Kenyatta stared out the window. Nobody said a word. She didn't look at him. Not once. Not until he reached over and touched her hand. You good? He asked. She nodded, and that was the last time she answered him. The rest of the day unfolded like a routine. Deshawn went to the garage to work on his fishing gear. Kenyatta washed clothes, folded them with shaking hands. Sharnay watched cartoons. Her favorite one. The one with talking animals and bright colors. The only thing that made her laugh. At 7:10 p.m., Kenyatta went into the bedroom and opened the top drawer of Deshawn's dresser. She pulled out the off-duty weapon he always kept there. A Glock 19 fully loaded, safety on. She carried it to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the edge of the tub. For 23 minutes, she didn't move. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She just sat. At 7:43 p.m., she unlocked the door. Deshawn was in the kitchen pouring sweet tea into a glass. He turned around, saw the gun. Ken, what you doing? She didn't yell, didn't curse. I saw what you did, she said. He blinked, set the glass down. You think you... The first shot hit his shoulder. He staggered back. I told you not to touch her, she said. He reached for his waistband, but the second shot dropped him. Right there in the kitchen, near the fridge where Sharnay's drawings were taped up with magnets. Kenyatta turned around. Sharnay was standing in the hallway, frozen, watching. And in that split second, something happened. Something in Kenyatta's eyes changed. She didn't want her baby to remember this. The noise, the blood, the fear. She whispered, come here, baby. Sharnay walked slowly, still holding her stuffed rabbit, still silent. Kenyatta knelt down, held her, kissed her on the cheek, and pulled the trigger one more time. That shot was the quietest, By the time neighbors called the police, the gun was on the floor, the TV was still on, the cartoon still playing. In the backyard, Kenyatta stood barefoot in the grass, her scrubs soaked, her eyes fixed on nothing. When officers arrived, she didn't run. She didn't deny. She said, "I begged him. I begged all of y'all." Nobody listened. Then she put her hands in the air and said nothing else. Not until the courtroom. The first officer to step into the house would later say he thought he'd walked into the wrong scene. There was no struggle, no broken furniture, no signs of chaos, just the steady hum of a television, a cartoon character dancing on the screen. A glass of sweet tea spilled across the counter, in blood. It pooled near the kitchen tile where Deshaun had collapsed, his badge face up on the floor, catching the light from the ceiling fan. Charney's body lay in the living room, curled like she was still asleep. A blue blanket wrapped around her, just like her mother always did. Her stuffed rabbit was under her chin. Her face was peaceful. Too peaceful. Paramedics rushed in, but no one raised their voices. There were no life-saving measures to try, no questions to ask. Everything was already over. In the backyard, Kenyatta stood still. Her eyes were dry, her hands loose at her sides. She didn't blink when they cuffed her. She didn't speak when they read her rights. When they asked what happened, she said, "I asked for help." No one knew what that meant. Not yet. The neighbors gathered on the sidewalk. Some wept. Others whispered. A few shook their heads. Not Kenyatta. Not that family. News vans arrived before the sun came up. Reporters used words like shocking and unthinkable. The headlines were fast and cruel. Mother murders cop, husband, and child. Houston officer slain in domestic tragedy. No one talked about the bruises, or the baby monitor, or the 2 years of medical records that showed a silent scream echoing from that house. At the precinct, the mood was split. Some officers couldn't believe it. Others weren't surprised. "She always looked tired," one said. "Too tired for someone that young." Her sister came to the station, demanded to see her. They let her. In the interview room, separated by glass, Kenyatta looked at her and whispered, "Tell Mama she was right. He wasn't who I thought." The autopsies confirmed what Kenyatta already knew. Charney hadn't been assaulted the night of the shooting, but she had been. Recently. And the marks on her legs, the evidence in her blood work, it painted a story no one wanted to hear. A story Kenyatta had been telling, without word, for months. The city was quiet for a few days. Then the question started. Why didn't she go to the police? Why didn't she leave? Why didn't she tell anyone? The truth is, she did. She told a counselor, a lawyer, a supervisor. She told them in tears, in appointments, in therapy sessions. But Deshaun wore a badge. And sometimes the badge isn't just protection, it's silence. Detectives walked into the house thinking they already knew the story. An angry wife, a domestic dispute, a murder-suicide gone halfway. But that illusion broke fast. Kenyatta wasn't erratic. She wasn't confused. She wasn't hiding a thing. She sat in the interrogation room with her hands folded and her voice calm. "I didn't want to do it. I had to." No theatrics, no tears. Just the steady, crushing honesty of someone who had stopped asking for permission to be believed. The evidence was collected, meticulously. Ballistics confirmed what Kenyatta said. 3 shots, one to Deshaun's shoulder, one to his chest, one to Charney's head, all from his off-duty weapon. No sign of a struggle, no forced entry, nothing out of place. But the bedroom? That's where everything began to shift. Investigators found the base of a nanny cam hidden in a smoke detector. The memory card slot was empty. They found a locked drawer in Kenyatta's nightstand. Inside, a USB drive, unlabeled. What was on it changed everything. Footage. 2 clips, both under 2 minutes. Deshaun, in Charney's room, touching her in ways no father ever should. The room fell silent when the detectives watched it. Veteran officers left the building without saying a word. One threw up behind a patrol car. The timeline suddenly made sense. The bruise, the silence, the visit to the law office, the security camera. They traced Kenyatta's movements for the past 6 weeks. She'd reported concerns twice, once to a therapist, once to a mandated reporter at her daughter's school. Both cases went unfiled. They interviewed her pastor, her co-workers, her sister. All of them said the same thing. She loved that child more than she loved herself. Kenyatta's internet history revealed searches for how to get custody from a cop, protecting special needs kids from abuse, and signs of trauma in nonverbal children. Deshawn's search history? One entry stood out. What happens if CPS investigates a cop? Investigators combed through his personal laptop, found deleted messages, forum chats, one burner email, enough to confirm a pattern, enough to crush every doubt. By the end of that week, the district attorney's office changed their language. It was no longer called a domestic incident. It was called an act of preemptive violence, one done to protect a child no one else had heard. But the law doesn't always bend with truth, and so the charge remained. Double homicide. One bullet for a predator, one bullet for an innocent, and the woman who fired them? Still in custody, still waiting. It took 11 months to reach trial, 11 months of silence from Kenyatta. No interviews, no letters, no TV appearances, just court dates and cold walls. The courtroom was packed on the first day, not with strangers, but with people who had known them. Neighbors, co-workers, officers from Deshawn's precinct, members of Kenyatta's church choir. On one side, the portrait of a decorated officer slain in his own home. On the other, a mother in a beige jumpsuit, hands folded in her lap, eyes hollow from waiting. The state opened their case simply. They said Kenyatta Fields committed a double murder, shot her husband in cold blood, then executed her daughter in an act of final desperation. They called it premeditated, controlled. They showed photos of the scene, described the blood, the bodies, the calm way she confessed. The jury listened. Some nodded. Some looked away. But everything changed when the defense stood up. They didn't start with an objection. They started with a question. What would you do if you knew no one was coming to save your child? Then they played the footage. The courtroom went still. There was no noise except for the soft whimper of a woman in the gallery, a teacher who had once told Kenyatta to just be patient. The jurors shifted. Some cried. One put her hand to her mouth. The footage was short, just enough to erase every headline they'd read before. The prosecution tried to recover, said she still had options. Call 911, report it again. Go to the media. But Kenyatta's attorney pointed to the calendar. Dates and reports, names of therapists, social workers, church leaders, all of whom failed to act. They presented Charnay's pediatric records, bruises, weight loss, anxiety. They brought up the failed CPS filing, the closed door at the station. Then came Kenyatta's statement. She didn't speak in front of the jury. Her voice came from a recording, made months before. I waited, I begged, I hoped he'd stop. But the truth is, he knew he could keep going because no one was going to stop him. And if I didn't do something, she wasn't going to make it to 12. When the audio ended, no one moved. The prosecution rested, quietly. In closing arguments, the DA said justice required accountability, that even when crimes are committed for reasons that feel right, they remain crimes. But the defense said something else, that what Kenyatta did wasn't about revenge. It was about rescue, not of herself, but of a child who couldn't scream. The courtroom was dismissed. The jury deliberated for 13 hours, and when they returned, the entire city held its breath. The verdict didn't bring cheers. There was no applause, no shouts of celebration, just the sound of someone quietly exhaling, like they'd been holding their breath for a lifetime. Guilty, manslaughter, both counts, 18 years. Eligible for parole in 10. Kenyatta didn't cry. She nodded, once, then whispered something no one could hear. But outside that courtroom, the impact rippled in every direction. At Charnay's old therapy center, her chair stayed empty for weeks. Her favorite fidget toy still sat on the shelf. The humming she used to make between tasks was missed most of all. In the neighborhood, the Fields' home went dark. Curtains drawn, mail piling up. The lawn grew wild. Someone eventually put a small white cross in the yard. No name, just 3 words. She tried first. At the church, Pastor Glover paused mid-sermon one Sunday and said, "Y'all judge with your mouths. God judges with his eyes, and he sees everything." Then he closed his Bible and walked off the pulpit. Grandma Loretta moved in with Kenyatta's sister. She didn't attend the sentencing. Said she'd already buried enough. She keeps Charney's blanket in a plastic bag. Unwashed. Still smells like strawberry shampoo. The officer who found Kenyatta in the backyard went on administrative leave. He told Internal Affairs he needed space to think. When asked later if he thought she was a danger to society, he answered, "She was the only one doing her job that night." The city didn't issue a public statement. No tribute, no review. Deshawn's precinct held a brief ceremony, lowered the flag, said the right words, then returned to patrol. But in private among themselves, some officers said what couldn't be written in reports, that they'd heard things, that there were rumors, that maybe, just maybe, someone should have looked closer. At the hospital where Kenyatta once worked, her old locker was cleared out. But on the inside of the door, someone found a sticky note still hanging. It read, "You are your daughter's voice. Keep speaking." People still argue about what happened. Some call her a murderer, others call her a mother. But those who knew her best, who saw the quiet sacrifices, the midnight drives, the years of holding together what was already broken, they don't call her anything at all. They just look away. Because once you admit the truth, you have to admit you saw it coming. They came back after 13 hours. 7 women, 5 men, some young, some gray-haired, all of them quiet. No eye contact with the gallery, no glances toward the defendant's table. Just the 4 persons standing, paper in hand. When the judge asked for the decision, her voice cracked, not from nerves, but from the weight of what she was about to say. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of manslaughter in the death of Deshawn Fields. Guilty of manslaughter in the death of Charney Fields." The room held its breath. No gas, no cries, just the shuffling of lawyers organizing papers and the sound of a grandmother biting her lip until it bled. Kenyatta didn't blink. She closed her eyes, breathed out slow, and whispered something under her breath. No one heard it, but her sister would later say it looked like she said, "Thank you for hearing me." The judge read the sentence. 18 years, possibility of parole in 10, and that was it. The gavel didn't echo loud enough to match the finality of what had just happened. But what lingered wasn't the sentence. It was the silence that followed. Jurors cried in the hallway. One had to be helped to her car. Another simply said, "That child died long before her mother pulled the trigger." The DA declined to hold a press conference. The defense attorney said only this: "She was unheard. Then she was unhinged. And still, she's not unloving." Kenyatta was led away in chains that didn't rattle much. She didn't look back. Not at the reporters, not at the lawyers, not at the family. Just down at her wrists, the ones that used to hold her daughter every night. The city moved on. But the story never really ended. Because a verdict is just a stamp. It doesn't fix the silence. It doesn't rewrite the neglect. It doesn't resurrect the little girl with the blue blanket or return the years no one paid attention. Justice in the courtroom is a ceremony. But justice, for a mother like Kenyatta, was something she chased every day, until the day she stopped running and raised a gun instead. What do you call it? When a mother kills her child to protect her. Not out of rage, not for control, but because the world she begged to intervene stayed silent. Is it murder? Is it mercy? Is it something in between? The courtroom gave it a name, manslaughter. But outside those walls, people called it everything else. To some, Kenyatta Fields was a cold-blooded killer, a woman who took justice into her own hands and crossed a line no mother ever should. To others, she was a casualty of a system that hears louder voices but ignores quieter cries. Psychologists debated the case on radio shows. Was it a psychotic break? A trauma-induced blackout? A slow-burn descent into vigilante desperation? But the one question that never went away was the one no expert could answer. Would you have done the same? If you watched your child suffer, if you begged for help and got none, if you saw the bruises and the fear and the silence growing inside your home, would you have waited or would you have acted? And if you acted, how far would you go? That's where the lines began to blur. Some called her brave. Others called her broken. But very few called her wrong without pausing first. Because this wasn't a story about good and evil. It was a story about betrayal, not between husband and wife, but between citizens and systems, between the vulnerable and the protected. And at the heart of it all, a little girl who never had the chance to say what happened to her. Shernai didn't leave behind a diary. She didn't have the words, but her body did. Her behavior did. Her mother saw it, knew it, felt it in her bones. And when no one else listened, she made the world listen with a gunshot. Now the world debates what that makes her. A murderer or a mother who did what she was trained to do as a nurse, as a caregiver, as a protector, to respond when signs of trauma were ignored. But the answer isn't on paper. It's in the space between heartbreak and justice, in the gray zone where law and love collide. And whether or not the verdict satisfied anyone, the truth remained the same. Kenyatta Fields didn't stop being a mother the night she pulled that trigger. She became the last one standing between her daughter and a silence too dangerous to ignore. Charnay Fields was buried with her blanket, the blue one, the same blanket she carried through every hospital visit, every meltdown, every night she couldn't sleep. The stuffed rabbit was tucked beneath her arm. Her hair was combed straight, just how her mother used to do it after bath time. There were no doves, no balloons, just a small choir and a minister who didn't try to explain what couldn't be explained. Kenyatta was not allowed at the funeral. She watched it later on a CD her sister mailed to the prison. She kept it in a Bible, page marked at Psalm 34. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted. Charnay's name lives on now, not in headlines, but in whispers of change. A foundation was created in her honor, Charnay's voice, dedicated to protecting special needs children from domestic abuse. Volunteers train teachers and therapists how to spot what doesn't speak, how to hear the unspoken cries of kids like Charnay, who never learned to say stop, but always knew when something wasn't right. In the Texas state legislature, a bill was introduced, named after her. It would require mandatory video monitoring in homes under special needs care when abuse is suspected. Some called it too late, but Kenyatta called it a beginning. Behind bars, she mentors other women, women with stories buried under shame and silence. She listens, not like a counselor, but like someone who understands what it feels like to scream without sound. Once a year on Charnay's birthday, Kenyatta writes a letter. They aren't sent. They're folded and placed under her pillow. This year's letter read, "You never had to speak. I heard you anyway." In Houston, the house where everything happened still stands, but it's empty, overgrown, no children's laughter, no front porch light. And yet some nights neighbors say they hear humming, faint, soft, like a little girl trying to fall asleep. Not everyone believes it, but those who do smile, because they know that even in silence, some names never fade. They echo forever. What do we do with stories like this? Do we file them away under tragedy? Do we whisper about them in private until something worse comes along? Or do we finally listen before another mother is forced to choose between saving her child or watching them suffer? This wasn't just a crime, it was a warning that silence has a cost, that systems built to protect can just as easily conceal, that not every monster kicks down the door, some tuck their children in at night, and sometimes the only person standing in their way is a mother. So ask yourself, how many signs do you need before you believe someone who says they're scared? How many bruises? How many missed calls? How many children, like Charnay, must go unheard before we admit we waited too long? Kenyatta Fields will serve her sentence, but she's not the only one. Every ignored report, every closed case, every time we looked away when it was easier than getting involved, those are sentences too. But it's not too late to speak, to report, to pay attention, because someone right now is going through the same thing, and they think no one will believe them either. Let them be wrong. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel, share this video, talk about the silence that kills, and be the voice someone else might be waiting for. Because Charnay didn't have one.